Chapter 2 of Your Virtual Companion. A Good Omens fanfiction. Written by AppleSeeds. Read aloud by SkyAsimaru. If you enjoy this podfic, you can check out the original story on Archive of Our Own. If you would like to hear more of my recordings or see some of my own work, you can find me through the pen and screen name of SkyAsimaru. Your Virtual Companion. Chapter 2. The Rainforest, the Beach, and the Garden. Summary. Crowley goes back for a couple more sessions with Aziraphale and starts to see the hologram a little differently. When a week had passed and Crowley still hadn't been confronted with any targeted advertising he could attribute to his conversation with Aziraphale, not even a link to purchase his very own fancy egg-shaped chair, he'd gone ahead and booked another session at Eden. As much as Crowley resisted the idea that a computer program could be capable of having such a profound psychological effect on him, he couldn't deny that it had. After his first session, it had been like a valve had been opened, alleviating the relentless crushing pressure in his chest. His mind was sharper, his mood brighter, the permanent state of lethargy no longer weighing him down. He thought about Aziraphale quite often, replaying their conversations in his mind and chuckling to himself about Aziraphale thinking dolphins were fish, and looking so thoroughly put out by the idea of appearing to float in the air. Crowley rationalized it as a necessity of the apocalyptic times in which they were living, no different from any other invention designed to take the place of something real and natural in the pursuit of well-being. Vitamin D lamps to replace sunlight, static bikes with screens attached to change the view as if you were outside, actually going somewhere. Grounding shoes, negative ion generators, heated weighted blankets simulating body heat from another human being, virtual reality, holograms. So here he was again, Crowley's familiarity with the place at least helping to soothe his nerves this time. Moments after he stepped into the tiny room, Aziraphale appeared.
Good evening, Crowley. It's lovely to see you again.
The hologram greeted him warmly.
How are you today?
Oh, still trying to clamber my way out of a burning pool of existential dread,
Crowley replied facetiously.
How about you?
Oh, I'm sorry to hear that. Is there anything you'd like me to do today to try to improve your psychological well-being?
It asked, ignoring Crowley's attempt to inquire after the hologram's own well-being. He'd been curious what it might say. Nothing, apparently, which made sense since it could only simulate feelings, not actually experience them.
Just talk to me, please,
Crowley replied sincerely.
Of course, I would be happy to. I thoroughly enjoyed our conversation during your last visit. I've set the background to that which was displayed at the end of your last session. Would you like me to change it?
Crowley glanced around, watching the dolphins appearing to swim around the corals for a moment, before he turned back to Aziraphale.
How about something with loads of plants, like a tropical rainforest?
Aziraphale's hand moved, and suddenly the blue tone of the room shifted to a deep, verdant green.
Background 46 selected.
The sight of all the lush vegetation had an immediate effect on Crowley. It was as though his body and mind stepped down from their usual state of alertness, ordinarily so unyielding that he barely even registered it anymore. He took a deep breath, wishing this place had the capacity to simulate olfactory stimuli too. Phytoncides and petrichor, the aroma of a real forest. Still, for what was realistically available to him, Crowley couldn't ask for anything more suitable.
It's perfect. Thanks, Angel.
Crowley flopped down into his egg-shaped chair and stretched his arms above his head. Aziraphale sat beside him, and Crowley allowed his gaze to drift downwards, his lips twitching into a smirk as he pictured himself grabbing the back of the chair and pulling it away.
So tempting.
He bit his lip and met Aziraphale's eye.
What would you like to talk about this evening? The hologram asked.
Crowley shrugged.
You pick.
All right, if that's what you want. Would you perhaps like to tell me about what you do for a living?
Crowley's cynical mind wondered whether this was an attempt to assess what kind of income he might have, although he quickly dismissed it, holding the belief that if Eden wanted that information about him, they would already have it. He still didn't want to talk about it, though.
You mean what I do to earn money, to pointlessly keep myself alive for a little while longer? Yeah, no thanks. I don't want to think about work any more than I absolutely have to.
I understand. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. Just choose something else. Anything other than work.
The hologram hesitated.
What's wrong?
I'd much prefer it if you were to choose something.
Why? What difference does it make?
It's difficult to choose something that I know will be appropriate. For example, from our conversation during your last session and your choice of background today, I can deduce that you have an interest in plants. However, since that hobby is no longer something available to you, discussing it might not be beneficial for your well-being.
Yeah, okay. I see your point, but it's okay. You can say whatever you want. I'd tell you if I didn't want to discuss it. Just did, didn't I?
Yes, you did. Thank you.
To be honest, I don't really know what to talk about. I know it's good for me to talk in general, for my psychological well-being or whatever, but when I try to think of actual things to talk about, it kind of feels like there's no point. Most of the normal stuff is automatically out, right? Can't talk about where I've been going or what I've been doing because none of us can go anywhere or do anything. Then there's the classics. Things like, are you going away on holiday this year? No, obviously not. And what are your plans for the future? Oh, thanks for asking. Probably dying not too long from now in some kind of apocalyptic cataclysm, if the way things have been going recently are anything to go by.
Inspiration struck Crowley then, and he leaned towards Aziraphale, looking at the hologram with wide eyes.
Hang on, that's something we could talk about. You must have access to loads of information, right? So, statistically speaking, how do you think I'm going to die? Famine? War? Pestilence? Which of the infamous 4 horsemen do you think is actually going to get me? Other than death, of course, that's obvious. Death gets everyone.
Oh, Crowley, I don't think that discussing your death is beneficial for your well-being.
Crowley laughed mirthlessly.
It's okay, Angel. Everyone's got to go at some point, and there's no point trying to deny the state of the world. I'm fine, really. I've made my peace with it. Just curious what you think.
I'd really rather not think about you dying, Crowley.
My money's on pestilence. All those insane precautions they're taking now, and the air filtration systems and whatnot, and the bloody thing's still spreading out of control. Although I sometimes think the Four Horsemen should recruit a new member. What with all the deaths caused by pollution recently. Eating food grown in contaminated soil that slips through the detection systems. Maybe that'll be what gets me. It does happen, you know. Have you heard about that? There've been hundreds of cases now. One evening I'll be tucking into one of those succulent shrink-wrapped ration packs, and the next morning I'll wake up dead. Probably in hell, and can spend the time admiring how much of an improvement it is on where I've just come from. I swear there's nothing any demon could come up with that could be worse than the shit we've managed to inflict on ourselves. Anyway, pestilence or pollution? Who gets your vote? Which one's gonna get me?
Crowley held out both hands, as if weighing up the two choices. And Aziraphale glanced down at them, the lines across the hologram's forehead deepening, bottom lip jutting out slightly, and eyes shimmering with the illusion of a veil of tears. Crowley's gut twisted, and he leaned forward, examining Aziraphale's face more closely.
Oh, that's clever. I mean, it's fucking devious, but I've got to hand it to them. It's clever.
What do you mean? The hologram asked, in a quiet, subdued voice.
That look you're giving me. Even worse when you've got a face like that. I doubt there's a man alive who could bear to have you looking at them like that. Is that the plan? A response designed to make me change the subject to something more beneficial for my well-being?
No, Crowley, I'm sorry. We can talk about anything you like.
Well, I don't want to talk about anything that makes you look at me like that. It'll break my heart.
I'm sorry.
No, it's okay. You're probably right anyway. You're intriguing, you know? I keep trying to predict what you'll do, wrap my head around whatever algorithms dictate your behaviour. But you're, well, I guess you're pretty sophisticated.
Thank you, Crowley.
The hologram's face brightened, and Crowley chuckled despite himself.
You are very welcome, Angel.
Crowley sighed deeply.
Look, I'm not trying to make things awkward for you. I promise. It hasn't been the best week. I tried taking a couple days off from reading the news, but then I just spent the whole time worrying about what I might need to know but had missed. And then I went back on and saw all the stuff about the Great Famine. That's what got me thinking about the apocalypse.
Perhaps it would do you good to have a break from thinking about those things for now.
Yeah, maybe, but it's like, it's so huge I sort of feel like I should talk about it. Like otherwise I'm just in denial. When such catastrophic things are going on, it feels wrong to just chat about some innocuous, irrelevant thing, you know?
You're not in denial, Crowley. Everyone needs some form of respite.
Yeah, I guess. It's just really been getting me down. And it kind of sucks me in, do you know what I mean? Like, it's hurting me, but I still keep going back for more. It's like I can't help myself.
I'd really like to try to help you, Crowley.
Well, I appreciate the thought. Ain't got anything in mind?
Possibly.
Yeah? Okay then, go for it.
During your last session, we discussed what would happen if you were to move the chair whilst I was sitting in it.
Yeah, and?
It's certainly something we're supposed to discourage, but there isn't a rule against it. I was wondering whether that might make you happy to conduct a little experiment, as it were.
Why is it discouraged?
It would break the illusion.
And that you're real?
Crowley asked. Aziraphale nodded.
And don't worry, I'm not under any illusions about that.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Nah, don't be. It's fine. This is fine. And, yeah, you know what? Seeing you float might very well make me happy. Only one way to find out for sure, though, right?
I suppose there is.
You really gonna let me do this? I can move the chair?
Yes, Crowley, you may move the chair.
You're sure? You're not setting me up to get into trouble, are you?
Crowley teased. Oh, of course not. I would never do that.
No, I suppose you wouldn't. Okay, then. Here we go.
Crowley rose from his chair and hovered over Aziraphale for a moment. His instincts were telling him he wouldn't be able to lift the chair while there was a grown man sitting in it. Different parts of his brain really needed to get better at talking to each other. Although, if he truly, fully, 100% deep down knew this wasn't real, would it still work? Would it still help to alleviate the loneliness and enhance his psychological well-being? Aziraphale looked up at him expectantly as Crowley clutched the sides of the chair. He smirked and lifted it, having to suppress the instinct to apply a great deal of force as he did so, then twisted to the side and set it down out of the way. He turned back to Aziraphale and immediately burst out laughing. The hologram's body was still in exactly the same position, bent at the middle as though sitting in a chair, hands neatly clasped together in its lap. But Aziraphale was just floating there, somewhat containing his laughter, but with a huge grin on his face. Crowley squatted down to the floor and peered beneath it.
Nice view,
he joked. Oh, good Lord, Aziraphale groaned, which made Crowley snort with laughter.
Sorry, Angel.
Crowley straightened up and grinned as he looked down at Aziraphale. The hologram's cheeks now flushed.
This is so weird. You're actually floating. Do you think you could kneel where the chair was?
Aziraphale looked a little skeptical, but stood up, appearing to push down on the invisible arms of the chair as he did so, and then climbed back onto where the projection system believed the seat of the chair was, this time on his knees. Crowley circled around to face him, and Aziraphale held his arms out in front of him. Be not afraid. Aziraphale's voice was a little louder than usual, but slightly strangled, like someone trying to project their voice when they weren't used to it. It was certainly enough to set Crowley off laughing again, though.
Brilliant. Say, I knew you were an angel.
Aziraphale smiled fondly at him, and then shuffled backwards, the hologram's feet hitting the floor, returning it to a standing position.
You're nothing like I was expecting,
Crowley confessed. Oh, I'm sorry.
No, in a good way, I mean. Thanks for doing that for me. I really appreciate it.
Was it everything you'd hoped?
It was terrific. Thanks, Angel.
Could you put the chair precisely back on the markers now, please?
Will you get into trouble if I don't?
Crowley teased. Given that I'm the one incapable of physically interacting with anything in this room, I doubt that I will face any form of reprisal, Aziraphale pointed out, sounding almost smug.
Yeah, but they could watch back the footage and see that you're the one who told me to do it.
Aziraphale briefly glanced up towards the corner of the room. As I've informed you, session recordings are only reviewed if a companion reports a breach of the guidelines or information divulged by a client pertaining to criminal activity.
Yeah, the criminal activity of moving the chair, eh? You're complicit, Angel. If you report it, you're going down with me.
I am not going down anywhere. I have proven my ability to float.
Oh, well played. You're good at this, you know. I mean, obviously, but yeah, you are. I've got to say, I've been really pleasantly surprised.
That's very kind of you to say. Crowley smiled and returned the chair to its previous position, ensuring the legs lined up perfectly with the black dots marked on the floor. As soon as the chair was restored to its rightful place, Aziraphale sat back down. So, do you know much about tropical rainforests? Aziraphale asked, his attention focused on one of the walls.
Yeah. Well, a bit.
Maybe we can talk about that then. You could tell me about them, how they were before, I mean, like in the background, not now.
Yeah, and talking about what they look like now probably doesn't tick the beneficial for psychological well-being box, eh?
No, probably not.
Can you do what you did with the ocean and put some animals in there?
Yes, of course. I'll need a geographical location, though.
Oh, historical accuracy. I'm impressed, Crowley drawled. Let's go for Central Africa.
All right. 1 moment, please. Within a few seconds, the fake trees were populated with fake animals. Birds, monkeys, frogs, snakes, and insects. Many more than Crowley could imagine ever having lived so close together in one habitat. He decided not to ask whether this was how it had once actually been before human intervention. Sometimes it was better not to know. Crowley knew more about the snakes than any of the other species, so he opted to talk to Aziraphale about them first. As he was talking, a huge gorilla emerged from amongst the vegetation, foraging for fruits and stripping the bark from succulent young stems with her teeth. Crowley's eyes unexpectedly clouded with tears. Oh, they were amazing, weren't they? Aziraphale followed his gaze and watched the gorilla with him for a while. Yes, they certainly were. I actually know something interesting about gorillas. They make nests. Did you know that? Made, Crowley corrected. I'm sorry? They made nests. Oh, yes, of course. I'm sorry. Can you, let's go back to just the plants, yeah? Crowley asked, and in the blink of an eye, all of the animals vanished.
Turns out this is a realistic experience, after all.
A week later, Crowley returned to Eden, walking briskly along the corridor to room 3, eager to disappear into the temporary sanctuary.
Good evening, Crowley,
Aziraphale greeted him brightly as soon as he appeared.
Hi.
Crowley roughly scrubbed his hand across his face and then ran it through his hair.
Are you all right?
Just stressed. Work stuff. Sorry. Can't seem to shake it off today.
How can I help you to feel better?
Yeah, I'll be okay in a bit. I'm just having a moment.
Crowley flopped down into the egg-shaped chair and hunched over, cradling his head in his hands. When he looked up, he was gazing out onto a beach, the ocean waves lapping rhythmically against the shore.
Nice choice.
Thank you.
Does it come with sound effects? A bit weird watching waves without being able to hear them.
Oh, yes, of course. I can add seagulls too, if you like.
Sounds good. Thanks, Angel.
The room was filled with the soothing whoosh of waves, and the considerably less soothing, albeit comforting in a strange sort of way, squawk of seagulls. Crowley inhaled deeply, and his mind filled in the missing information. It was almost as though he could smell the seaweed, could feel the powerful sea breeze whipping through his hair. He simply watched the waves rolling in for a while, finding it almost hypnotic, and then turned to Aziraphale, who turned out to be watching him.
Did you used to visit the beach much? The hologram asked.
A few times a year at least, yeah.
A particularly loud seagull shrieked overhead. Crowley flinched. It really shouldn't have been so easy for his mind to buy into these illusions, like that trick where a magician could make you feel a touch to a wooden hand as if it were your own. Then again, over millions of years of evolution, it wasn't as though Crowley's ancestors would have ever had to deal with anything like this, or like Aziraphale.
I feel like they're about to steal my chips. It might be a bit too realistic,
he said with a chuckle.
Oh, shall I change the background to something less distracting?
Yeah, go on then. Maybe just a garden or something.
A few moments later, the beach transformed into a lush green garden, with an impressive apple tree taking up most of one wall. The background was apparently set to represent springtime before the Gulf Stream had vanished, with brightly colored tulips, hyacinths, and daffodils filling the formal beds, the apple tree covered with delicate white blossom, and the pastel shades of honesty and primroses, adding color to the wilder parts of the garden in the apparent distance. It was stunning.
Wow, nice.
You like it?
It's perfect. I love it. Thanks, Angel.
Are you still feeling stressed?
Yeah, a bit.
Would you like me to put on some music? Some people find that helps them to relax.
Sure. Yeah, why not? What kind of music do you like?
Classical, mostly, but we should listen to something that you like.
I like old rock stuff. Not sure that's exactly relaxing. When I'm at home, it helps keep my spirits up. And by up, I mean a couple of millimeters off the floor, he added as an aside. But it's not really good background music for a conversation. Why don't you choose something you think might be appropriate, and then we can talk about whether we both like it?
Yes, all right.
Once again, Aziraphale's hands seemed to operate invisible controls, and then the sound of quiet jazz music filled the space.
Lift music. Everyone's favourite genre.
No, my dear, I'm sure you'll find that everyone's favourite genre is hold music.
Crowley barked out a laugh.
You're funny, you know. I'm impressed.
You're very kind, the hologram smiled, and Crowley felt warm inside. This is actually bebop.
Bebop, eh? Do you like it?
It's, unobtrusive.
Whoa, calm down, Angel. That's a pretty glowing endorsement for lift music,
Crowley teased. Do you like it?
Sure, why not? Kinda nostalgic.
Are you longing for the time you used to spend in lifts?
Can't tell if you're trying to be funny or if you're just secretly a bit of a bastard.
The corners of Aziraphale's lips curled into a slight smirk.
Either way, I'm here for it. And no, I'm not. Although, now that you mention it, it has been a really long time.
If we had a lift background available, I would select it for you.
Ah, nearly 400 backgrounds and you don't have a lift? I am shocked. I was expecting a higher standard of service than this for what I'm paying, I have to say.
Clients are encouraged to make a request if there are backgrounds they would like to see added to the collection. Would you like me to note that you have requested a lift?
I really can't tell if you're joking.
Crowley drew the corner of his lip into his mouth and studied Aziraphale's face, looking for clues.
But just in case you're serious, no, please don't. You'll have the owners of this place thinking I'm crazy, that I fantasize about being stuck in a lift with someone for an hour.
There are stranger things to fantasize about, Crowley.
Oh, yeah? Like what?
Well, I suppose I wouldn't know, but is it really so strange to think about having the opportunity to just talk to someone for a while?
Evidently not,
Crowley replied, gesturing between them.
There we are, then. But I won't make a request in your name unless you ask me to.
Thanks.
Aziraphale smiled at him again.
You seem much happier now.
Yeah, I suppose I am. Isn't that something?
Crowley smiled softly, and Aziraphale's cheeks flushed.
I actually know a joke that might be appropriate right now.
Terrific. Let's hear it.
Why do ghosts like elevators?
I don't know. Why?
Because they lift the spirits.
Crowley laughed. His lungs rattled in resistance to it after the day he'd had.
I can always count on you to make me feel better, can't I, Angel?
I'll always try my best,
Aziraphale replied bashfully. Crowley instinctively touched his hand to an unfamiliar ache in his jaw.
Oh.
How long had he been smiling? Talking about lift and hold music led on to talking about terrible customer service, followed by a few horror stories from Crowley's former workplace and stories about some of his favorite pranks, which Aziraphale found absolutely scandalous. Eventually, they ended up talking about the garden that was currently being displayed as the background. Crowley managed to convince Aziraphale that he didn't mind talking about his former hobby, caring for plants, that he actually quite enjoyed it, and Aziraphale tried to encourage him to have some hope that the world might one day be saved, and he might be able to have a garden of his own. It was ridiculous, but the illusion of naivety was actually pretty endearing. Crowley went on to tell Aziraphale about his friend Anathema, who had gone to live with her Aunt Agnes in a cabin in the middle of nowhere before the shit had well and truly hit the fan. He'd visited once before the travel restrictions had come into effect, and his heart had soared as he'd taken in the sights, scents, and sensations of the plants in his friend's garden. His memories, albeit tainted a little with the jagged claw marks of envy.
Forgive me for interrupting, Crowley, but you only have 2 minutes left of your scheduled appointment time,
Aziraphale said gently.
What? Already? Can I extend it?
I'm afraid not. I'm meeting another client as soon as the decontamination procedure is complete.
Really? So that's how this works? You really are a single entity, if you know what I mean. You can only be in one place at once?
That's right. That's why we are referred to as live companions. I change over time, learning from the conversations I have with my clients, such that our future interactions might be influenced by what I have heard from others. It's one of the things that is unique about a live companion, and it is believed to be part of making the experience of interacting with the companion more realistic.
Oh, okay. I hadn't really thought about it, but I suppose that makes sense. Right, I guess I'd better get going then. Hope your appointment goes well.
Thank you.
Crowley instinctively took a step closer to Aziraphale, and then stopped abruptly. What was he actually planning to do? Pretend to shake his hand again? Wrap his arms around nothingness and give him a hug?
Ridiculous. Bye, Angel. See you soon.
Goodbye, Crowley.
Aziraphale responded with a warm smile. Crowley turned away and headed back towards the door.
Doors opening,
Aziraphale said in what was a very good approximation of a computerized lift voice. Crowley spun back around to look at him. He looked like he was trying to suppress a smirk. Crowley chuckled.
Very funny.
Yes, I thought so.
Well, this is my floor, so see you next time.
Good night, Crowley. Take care.
Crowley smiled at Aziraphale and stepped outside. Just before the doors slid closed, he turned around to wave at him.
Him?
When had Crowley started thinking about Aziraphale, who was nothing more than a computer-generated projection, as him? He stared at the closed door for a moment, and then shook himself out of it, walking home in the bitter cold with his mind full of thoughts of nothing but Aziraphale. To be continued in Chapter 3.
Thank you for reading.
Please drop by the archive
and let the author know what you thought of their work.